morning, everyone. Welcome to Las Vegas. My name is Leslie Anderson, and I am excited to welcome you to the annual IICRC Summit. On behalf of the IICRC and the Board of Directors, I want to thank each of you for your dedication and hard work towards drafting and revising and working on all of these standards for the American National Standards for the cleaning, restoration, and inspection industries. Without your commitment and expertise, we would have no standards. I'd like to especially thank and congratulate the following consensus bodies. The ANSI IICRC S400, Standard for Professional Cleaning, Maintenance, and Restoration. We're almost there. The S520, Standard for Mold Remediation, and the S700, Standard for Professional Fire and Smoke Remediation, and the Harmonized Glossary. Both the S400 and S700 are new first edition standards, while the S520 is a revision of the 2015 S520 standard. The Harmonized Glossary, which if you haven't seen it, it is really cool. Check it out. That body that put that together, just amazing work. It's a valuable resource to the industry as well as to our standards consensus bodies.
Thank you, Leslie, for that lovely introduction and opening of the Standards Summit. And thank you to those of you who are joining us virtually today, as well as to everyone who made it here in person. I know if you came in yesterday, it was a bit of a bumpy ride for a lot of us. So, yay, we're here and alive. So we're going to make the most of this week. So this morning, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers, Darren Foote and David Oakes, IICRC's Vice Chairs for Standards. And along with them, I will be helping to put together our general session, and we're going to be talking about IICRC standards. What exactly is it that we do? And then we'll build on that for tomorrow's general session, so please come back.
One of the first things we talk about, we share all the time, but this is so key critical to writing a standard and understanding a standard, is our important definitions. So shall, should, and recommended. And as we take a look at these, and again, I know you've seen these before, but shall says the practice or procedure that you're talking about is mandatory. That's no, I don't hear any wiggle room in mandatory due to either natural law or regulatory requirements. So an example from the S520, remediators shall follow label directions carefully and explicitly. Well, it's on the 520, but if I look at that, I can see how that can have ramifications both on regulatory requirement and natural law. There's laws about how we apply chemicals, and if we don't, the natural law says it might blow up in your face or simply not work as well, depending on which ones you mix. And so that's an important aspect of that. Should tells us that the procedure we're discussing is a component of the accepted standard of care. If we say we should do something or should not, that's part of our standard of care to be followed. An example from the S500. Following a Category 2 water intrusion, carpet, cushion, or pad underlay should be removed and discarded. Category 1, you want to dry it? Go ahead. Category 2, in essence, the S500 has taken that decision away from you. To be in compliance with the standard of care, that's something you need to do. When we talk about shall and should, we refer to those as trigger words because they're triggering an action or I guess a non-action if we say you should not do that. And so those are the critical things we need to be aware of and really consider how we use this. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Recommended is just that. The consensus body says we think this is important enough that it should be in a document, but we're not dictating that it's part of the standard of care. You don't have to show a deviation from a recommendation if you don't follow it. So there's a couple of things about that where the consensus body says, hey, this is important. For example, from the S700, it's recommended that fire restoration projects be organized into phases depending on the need for emergency services. I wasn't on that consensus body, but you can kind of hear the discussion of, hey, this is what we do and it's critical. And someone else going, that is important, but it's not something everyone does in every job. Does a prudent restorer always have to do that? Well, maybe not. Okay, then we recommend it. We feel it's important and that's something that maybe ought to be done. Gotta be careful to use that should word in there. That's part of our English language. But it's not at the point right now where it's part of the standard of care. Oftentimes we might use recommended as kind of a stepping stone and say, well, right now it's a recommended. And then we go for review later on. We say, you know what, this is really what's happening in the industry. This is the right way to do it. And maybe we elevate recommended up to a should at that point. And so it can kind of allow us to move something in as consensus bodies we feel are important. Two other words that we see a lot that I think they're kind of underutilized and sometimes misrepresented are may and can. Again, when we're talking about these words, we're talking about how they're identified for use in a standard of care, not how they're used in everyday words and vernacular we use out there. So may tells us that when the term is used, it's signifying permission. Yeah, that's okay to do that. It's not saying it's good or bad, right or wrong. S700, contents may be restored in place. There's times that makes sense, there's other times it doesn't. You may do that, that's okay. It's not being dictated or pushed, just saying that that's okay to do that. And can says that's a possibility, that's something that might work. Signifies ability or possibility that's open to the use of the document.
We're going to talk about what not included in the standard, but before we do that, I think when we look at standards, there's several purposes that we have standards for. And if you ask, if you ask most people, well, in our industry, it's so we can get paid, right? If we're doing the work, I want to make the insurance company or customer pay for it. And if you look at the people who are providing the funds, it's so I don't have to pay for it. Isn't that really what most of we get? Those of us that are out there meeting with the consumers and the vendors, isn't that what we hear? How do I get paid for it? That is part of it, but the other part of it is really to bring in a standard, which means a minimum. When you see a shall and a should, those are minimums. Those are not maximums, those are minimums. So to bring everybody into the center, that's my personal goal, is to be realistic about this, bring it into the center. And then there's a fourth component of standard writing, and that's the educational component. We have hundreds of years worth of experience sitting here, and there's a tremendous amount of knowledge out there, and a willingness to share that knowledge, and that's really appreciated. So we're going to look at non-standard content. We've heard about the purpose of the foreword being either procedural or performance-based, and you know we're kind of focused on one, but it ends up sometimes being something different. That template language that Millie talked about, the pins, that is extremely important, and at times the pins actually get changed. I know in the first S540, we were in that committee was running for a couple of years and realized there was no way we were going to be able to accomplish what the pins called for, because it also called for, you know, biological catastrophes. And so we changed the pins and focused it into the trauma and crime scene cleanup specifically for human. It is very important that pins was done, and then henceforth we were able to adjust the scope purpose of that standard. So how we're going to read the standard is part of that forward, and what's included and what's not included, and then what the deviations are from that standard. And I know we're being repetitive here. So when I first was involved in standards, it was kind of like, okay, you're on the standards committee, go do this thing, and kind of got a little lesson on should and shall, but not really quite understanding that. And then as we moved on through the process, we've become more educated thanks to Millie and the Standards Committee as guidance. And that's what we're here trying to do, is trying to guide you, give you the tools so that you come up with a standard that is understandable. And you can see from what Darren talked about how just some simple things that seem on the surface to make sense can also lead into some potential problems with the standards, especially when we're getting into that should.
Chris Curto here. So not to pick on the whole reference thing, but why are we even doing it? Why are we referencing specific sections in a different standard? Can't we do broad references? For instance, when you read the S500 and it says, you get into mold, but we have a whole section or a whole standard, just go look at that. But when we get into issues of specific, why is that necessary? Why can't we write the necessary language into the actual standard writing at the time?
Chris couldn't have said it better. Thank you much. You stole the show. That's just exactly what we needed to hear there. Yes, either include it or don't include it. And if you do need to reference something or not, I think really the place is not in references. I really think that place is in acknowledgments. Because yes, we want to acknowledge those documents and people who provided information, but if we leave it out of the reference section, then I think that makes it a lot safer, doesn't it, Millie? Uh-oh, put her on the spot. Uh-oh.
Well, no. No, well, because an acknowledgement has its place, no doubt about it, right? So sometimes we'll acknowledge another document. Maybe we worked with another organization and another document to put our document together. So the acknowledgement certainly has its place, but that's a different place than the references, right? So the references, we have to have them. And sometimes it's hard for us to take verbatim language from another standard and put it in our standard because what we want to say is 15 pages long. Right, so we don't want to do that, but we do want to reference it because it's important. If we're talking about mold in the 500, we'll reference the 520 and be done with it, because that's the best and most efficient way to handle that. There are other times when we will want to talk about a more narrow in scope reference, and we can do that as well. So sometimes it has to be a combination of all three: acknowledgements, references, inline references, footnotes, a combination of all of those things thoughtfully selected for each circumstance. I'm saying all this and saying nothing by saying it, right? I mean, it's like, but, yeah.
There are obviously times it's appropriate for a general reference, where you say, you know, if you're doing water damage, you come across mold, look at the S520, or if you come across an issue with HVAC, the 590, or context of 320. That's appropriate to say, that's a different topic, you should go to that area. And that's why, again, we'll put this on our agenda and discuss how to do it, but there are times you want to have a very specific reference that says, the reason we've made this a should or a shall is because this other document with authority over here says this. And that's why we made this decision. It's critical that you understand what that says. And so to reference that again, maybe near inline, it's better to say this section of this document. And what we want to talk about is, you know, if you say this document this year, that here's actually what it is, then that language is not going to change. If we do that with the standards, we'll look at that. So yeah, the more specific you can get, the better it's going to be, because then it says this is why we made this decision. And there's times you do have to have that.
I'm a triple master, IICRC triple master. I'm also a certified indoor environmental consultant. We just had the Standards Writing Summit, where we're all getting our respective consensus bodies. The one I participated this week was the field guide for remediators. So this has been a very long process, I think nearly 9 years. We've finished our review. There's a little bit of cleanup to do, then it's going to go out for peer review. So very, very exciting. When we're in the same place, we can skip through commentary and paragraphs and language much quicker when we're with each other. So we achieve a lot during the year when we're on our Zoom calls, obviously, and then we go away and read what we've done. But when we're in a room, it's much more dynamic and we achieve a lot more and a lot faster.
The annual summit is, in my opinion, has been a really worthwhile process. I think it's the third year now we've actually done the annual summit. It means we can get together, we can do face-to-face, which is so important. We work on Zoom, nothing wrong with that, and we have good attendance. But I think when we've actually in a room all together, we can actually discuss better, sort of go through the process a lot easier.